Hey everyone, and welcome back to, well, something that's a bit different from the norm. Now, even though World of Warcraft is a fantasy RPG and Destiny 2 is a science fiction shooter, it's kind of amazing how many direct parallels there are between these two games. Legion launched with 5 open world zones, Destiny's launched with 4. WoW has Battlegrounds, Destiny has the Crucible. WoW has Dungeons, Destiny has Strikes. Legion brought Mythic Plus, Destiny even has Nightfalls, and both of them have quite a lot of raiding being involved. So, today, I'm not doing a Destiny 2 review. That would be old news, that would be boring. What I want to do is a World of Warcraft focused look at Destiny 2. Basically, this video is for people who, you're playing WoW, we're all playing WoW, and we've seen this new icon appear on our Battle.net launcher, maybe some of our friends are playing it. This video exists just to let you know what the game is, and maybe if it's something that you'd be interested in. And we're going to kick that off with, well, an overview of what Destiny 2 actually is. So it's a shooter, it's got RPG-like progression, and it's got an endgame that will feel quite familiar to you. Is Destiny 2 an MMO? Kind of. It's weird, I actually find myself having slightly more interactions with other players, even though you are limited to each zone being instanced to I think about 20 people. Now, the core loop of Destiny 2, like with World of Warcraft, is getting gear to do more damage so you can get more gear and do more damage. The core difference, of course, is the gameplay, but that's something that we'll get into a little bit after we've covered the actual content of this game. So Destiny 2 has 4 open world zones. These are really big, lush areas, they're crammed with a lot of detail, and really the visuals here are spectacular. The world itself feels very rich, and because of some of the MMO-like systems, it actually feels quite active and populated. There are public events which spawn in regularly, and these are kind of like Guild Wars 2 world events, so players will often, from across the zone, rush towards this event to do it, and each event has a heroic mode. These are kind of reminiscent to Ulduar heroics, actually, where you have to activate the heroic mode by doing something in-game. So, for one, it's a defense objective, but if you shoot down the enemy ship that's attacking the area, you actually trigger heroic mode, and often this just means, a boss will come down, or there'll be some sort of new objective for you to do. Now, the timings of these pretty much mean that you can just keep on doing them, and so far they've not really felt too repetitive for me, and that's mostly because of the gameplay design being super strong. Now, the other cool part of Destiny 2's world is Lost Sectors. These are kind of like miniature dungeons that you wander into while you're out in the world. You'll normally find a mini-boss NPC and a bunch of trash, and killing those will get you a loot chest at the end. Now, there are also patrols in the world which, basically, they're world quests. They're okay, they're not great, but hey, there's something to do. And then each day for each zone you get 3 different challenges. Doing these is going to give you some more rewards for content that you're likely already going to be doing, and they'll maybe encourage you to try a new gun or something like that. Now, all this content that I've talked about here basically gives you rep tokens for that planet, which you then hand over to an NPC in exchange for some legendary gear, but we'll talk more about gearing later on. Now, moving on from the world content, we then got strikes. So these are designed for 3 players, and they are basically dungeons. So you'll fight your way through the strike, and you'll eventually fight a boss at the end. Now, the bosses are actually pretty damn good. They certainly learn good lessons from MMORPG raid design. Generally, they're multi-phase encounters, they've got a few intermission phases as well as some trash. Now, for me, they generally avoid being bullet sponges in the bad sense. And most of the multiplayer bosses have actually been really fun for me, and you actually do end up wiping. It's no slouch in terms of you actually having to be on the ball. Now, death is kind of interesting here. You can manually respawn after 30 seconds, or an ally can revive you, but in doing so, of course, your ally puts themselves at risk, and in a strike, if the whole team dies, you go back to your last checkpoint. Now, on top of normal strikes, you've got Nightfalls. They're basically Mythic Plus, so it's a timed run with some modified effects, and these are no joke. You really do want to have a good group who knows what's actually going on in VoIP. You gotta beat the timer to win, and yeah, they really are a lot of fun. And then finally, we do have raids, which should be opening any day now on PC, so, of course, depending on when this video goes live. Once again, though, these are, they're really well done in terms of being a shooter translation of traditional MMORPG gameplay. The bosses themselves are quite varied, and while, again, bosses in this game can feel a bit bullet spongy, they generally do manage to pull out the right balance of things. The environments of the raids, from what I've seen, are quite intricately designed, which is one nice, sort of inherent benefit of being a shooter as well, is that the boss arena can factor a lot into the gameplay. Now, from what I hear, D2's launch rate is not as good as Destiny 1's Vault of Glass, but that it's still pretty solid. Then for the PvP players, Destiny has the Crucible, where you'll face off in teams of 4 across a variety of different objectives and maps, which ranges from competitive modes like Search and Destroy to casual ones like Clash and Domination. For me, I've really enjoyed the PvP of Destiny, and a lot of that's because it feels close enough to the approach of Halo in a few ways. Of course, I love Halo from back in the day. It's also got a relatively high time to kill with a focus on headshot damage and power weapon sort of usage, controlling all that stuff. And really, it just rewards people playing together as a team, whereas sometimes Call of Duty sort of is just about running around a map in circles, which is not really as much fun for me. Now, for PvP, there's also a special thing called Trials of the Nine. Basically, you play PvP matches and your wins or losses are counted. The goal is to get to 7 wins during the weekly reset, though if you get 3 losses, you're knocked out for the week, so you want to sort of do as good as you can. And that's really it for the endgame content. As you can see, it's super team-focused. You can do a lot of, like, the world content solo, but honestly, the best way to play this game is to get your friends together and actually play as a team. That really is where it shines. While it might not be a massive MMO, say in the World of Warcraft sense, it probably does have as much, if not more, in the way of player interaction because of how they've just designed a lot of their world systems quite intelligently. Now let's cover leveling up in Destiny 2. It's kind of strange. The D2 campaign is really bad from a narrative perspective. The writing is embarrassing, and the only popular character is the Nathan Fillion quip machine that just reacts sarcastically to everyone, but basically never says anything of substance at all. It's a complete mess, and unfortunately the level design of the single-player sections is boring. It's not great. Yeah, not good at all. The campaign is mostly focused on introducing you to the 4 planets of the game and giving you some sort of, experience before you hit endgame. Now, while the main campaign sucks, there are adventures, which are pretty much just side quests. You'll find these strewn across the world, and actually, they're pretty good. So that's at least a bit of a cherry on top, I suppose, to take you away from the main campaign. And then finally, for the narrative content, there is some stuff once you hit max level. Basically, each planet has a quest, which will give you some rare gear at the end. And they're actually pretty fun. But really the core message here is that you don't want to play this as a single-player narrative game. It just doesn't do that well in that regard. Now that you've seen what's up with the leveling and endgame content, let's actually cover the gameplay and the systems. So Destiny 2 is a shooter with 3 different classes. You've got the Hunter, the Warlock, and the Titan. Each one of these has 3 subclasses, and each subclass has its own unique melee, unique dodge, unique grenades, and an ultimate. So yeah, it's 3 classes with 3 specs each. Now, unlike most MMOs, everyone is a DPS. Now, there is some utility, like Warlocks can throw down a heal. But the progression here with the classes is quite simple, and it won't take you that long until you've basically got it all unlocked. And this, I think, then gets us onto the shooting. So this is where Destiny 2, as an FPS, of course, lives and dies. You're going to be shooting a lot, so it better be damn fantastic. The good news is they've delivered. The combat design of Destiny 2, honestly, it's pretty much best in class, and this comes down to 2 different things: the gunplay and the enemy designs. Then the enemies themselves have weak spots, and this is really key to how it plays. Hitting the weak spots, of course, will deal more damage, and it's super satisfying. This is mostly down to the excellent feedback that this game has with the audio-visual stuff. You just feel really damn powerful in this. Now, the gunplay is also great. The feedback in general is really good, which of course helps to, keep this game engaging. Enemies explode with really crunchy sound effects when you hit a weak spot. The shooting sounds for each gun, I think, sound great. Basically, it's just really, really polished in the look and feel department. Now, the actual gunplay itself is, I think it's traditional enough. It's just executed to a very, very high level. Now, the guns themselves, especially as you progress more, all have unique feeling elements and effects which change up how you use them. Basically, they've got perks. Now, the game itself incentivizes you aiming at enemy weak points quite a lot, which can help the combat feel kind of engaging and challenging because you're always just trying to hit those weak points. You're always challenging yourself. So for me, this comes together to be one of the best feeling PvE shooters that I've seen. Certainly for me, it beats Borderlands 2 because of the quality of the gunplay. Now let's talk about gearing. So gear drops in quality levels, with Legendary, which is purple, and Exotic, which is yellow, being the best 2 types. You can only equip 1 exotic weapon and 1 exotic bit of armor at a time, and the exotics are really similar to WoW Legendaries. Certainly the dev team got some inspiration there. But I think it works better with G2. Basically, you get this gear by doing most forms of content. Sometimes gear just directly drops, but most of the time it comes from things called engrams. These are basically just loot tokens. You take them to an NPC who's called the Cryptarch in the game's social hub area, and he kind of identifies them. Honestly, it's a bit like taking stuff to Deckard Cain in Diablo. Now, these random drops come from just various types of content, though you do have weekly milestones, which are kind of like weekly meta quests, and they'll give you reliably quite powerful stuff. And these are things like doing weekly PvP matches, doing the Nightfall, doing the Strike, doing the Raid, that kind of thing. Now, you might think all this RNG sounds terrible, but it actually works out okay. So, gear that is useless gets broken down into a resource that you can take to the gunsmith for reputation. Then every time you fill his rep bar, he gives you a legendary engram, so it's always kind of useful. You then have the infusion system. Now this is great, and I've got to wonder if it's going to make it into World of Warcraft somehow. So, let's say you've got a gun that you love, but its item level is 250. You then get another gun of the same type, but you don't really like it, but it is item level 270. That might be a bummer, but not because of infusions. You can infuse the 250 weapon that you like with the 270 one. This will destroy the weapon that you don't want, and it will bring the one that you do want up to the higher item level of the one that you didn't want. So imagine if you could just do this to an Arcano Crystal in World of Warcraft, it would be kind of crazy. But overall though, this means that you do feel like you've got a bit more control over the game's RNG, and that is a very good thing indeed. Of course, the game is not without its problems. The endgame can feel very sparse from a purely PvE perspective. The drive to get more loot is there, but I just don't think that players will be running Destiny raids for as long as they'll be running Warcraft ones, and the console version of the game has had some issues with that. You do actually gear up to the soft cap of gear pretty quickly, and once you've done that, most of the gear that you get is just from the weekly quests. And for me, this means that Destiny 2 doesn't have enough meat in its bones to be my main game. It just cannot compete with World of Warcraft in that regard. But it's a good side game, and that's really where it is for me. Now, they are working and fixing some of these things, but we've yet to see patch notes. And they also did just announce that the first DLC is coming out in a month. Do remember, of course, that that might seem crazy from the PC perspective, but the console guys have had this game for quite a while. So basically, it seems like at the start, the PC players have managed to avoid a bit of a content drought. So, should you play Destiny 2? Well, if you like shooters and you like MMOs, yeah, that just makes sense. You're probably playing it right now. If you've got a group of 2 to 3 friends to play this game with, then I'd say yeah, it's actually really fun co-op. If you are planning to play this game solo, no, I would not recommend Destiny 2. And the same goes if you fundamentally don't like shooters. This doesn't really do much to appeal to people who are not really into shooters. But I can definitely say it's a fantastic PvE shooter with MMO-like elements and group play, with some gearing systems that you might be familiar with. So I think that while it's not going to have, a massive overlap with the World of Warcraft audience, certainly you play WoW and maybe you play some Overwatch and you like shooting, this game can actually slot in and probably still be of some degree of interest to you. So, there you go, that's my thoughts on Destiny 2 from a World of Warcraft perspective. For me, it's probably going to be filling the gap until the Antorus patch comes out with whatever other sort of goodies they'll stuff in there. But really, that's it for me. I will see you on the channel during BlizzCon, where I'll be doing a whole bunch of World of Warcraft content I can't wait for. It's a bit of a yearly tradition that we kind of go a little bit crazy at BlizzCon over here. So yeah, we're going to see if World of Warcraft Surf's Up Champions is going to be the new expansion. Anyway,